Well, following the launch of U.S. attacks in Houthi targets, the Islamic regime is really feeling the heat. Joining us to discuss the goals and agenda of these airstrikes is Colonel Rich Outzen from the Atlantic Council. Rich, thank you so much for joining us. Glad to have you on. With these new airstrikes on Yemen by the U.S., what is the U.S. seeking to achieve, and will it have an impact on the region, whether for better or for worse?
Well, it's good to be with you. I think the immediate goal is to restore deterrence. I think the Trump administration and during the campaign was very critical of what it saw as a soft or tepid response by the Biden administration to the Houthi provocations. Essentially, one of the tenets of U.S. statecraft after the Cold War has been that the U.S. guarantees the sanctity of commercial travel and trade in the global commons, and so the airspace and waterways. And what we saw was essentially piracy, right, where the Houthis were attacking shipping that was associated with Israel or with the West, even indirectly, while it was not molesting, say, Chinese or Russian. And this is sort of an affront to the American principle that commerce and trade will flow, even if there's regional conflicts going on. So I think the main idea here is to inflict a painful enough blow that the Houthis realize there is proverbially a new sheriff in town, and you can't get away with this anymore. The United States will use the full weight of its military capabilities to ensure commerce and to protect its allies.
Now, of course, according to what we saw President Trump write on his own social media, this is also a message to Iran. And we saw this morning that the IRGC, some of their officials are attempting to suddenly distance themselves from their own terror proxy, the Houthis. Do you think that these attacks will motivate the Islamic Republic to negotiate, as President Trump has been advocating for, or could it have the opposite effect?
Well, they're trying to salvage the Iranians, I think, what remains of their at once very impressive network of proxies, of course, thanks in large measure to Israel's defense efforts. The Hezbollah in Lebanon has taken severe and heavy blows. Assad, who was a cornerstone of this proxy network, has been overthrown in Syria. The Houthis, and of course, Hamas, which has served in many regards as a proxy for Iran, also has taken heavy blows. The Houthis are the last bastion of this strategy. And the Iranians are clever. They will claim distance, and they will say we don't really control them, and they'll say sort of tacitly, yes, this is not something we formally support anymore, trying to distance them, as you say. But I think at the end of the day, this is such a core part of their strategy for the region that, yes, they'll negotiate, and yes, they'll try to appear as if they are distancing or ending the proxy support. But in reality, they're going to do everything they can to motivate the Houthis to remain as part of this resistance front.
Absolutely. And I do want to note, just for our viewers, that the highest authority for the Houthis is actually the Houthis Jihad Council. That's what it's called. And of course, on that committee sits a current member of the IRGC. So these associations, the claims that there isn't one is really not at all in reality. Now, we are in hostage talks, and there has been some controversy over the U.S. directly negotiating with Hamas, a move that the administration seems to have perhaps already backtracked on. Was this a mistake on the part of the U.S. or something strategic?
Well, I think it's more just the mode of operation for the new team. The new team is action-oriented. I think the Trump administration, even when they were in the transition phase, understood that there's limited time in the first year of an administration to get substantive and tonal change in how you're conducting your foreign policy. The sort of normal transition period is slow and you lose time, and then all of a sudden you're in the election cycle for the next midterms. I think, if anything, haste is waste is the mantra of the new team, and they wanted to strike and talk directly to, and this is, by the way, the modus operandi for Trump is long-standing. He'll talk to the bad people. He'll talk to Kim Jong-un. He'll talk to Putin directly. He'll talk to the Iranians, and in this case, the willingness to breach this sort of rule of thumb that we won't talk directly to Hamas or directly to folks like that is less important to this team, in my view, than getting immediate effects at de-escalation and the release of hostages. So I think there's a little pushback on it from some corners, and I don't think they'll substantively backtrack, but they may take a different path to do the same thing, which is to get Hamas into a direct conversation and get a changed behavior.
Now, in the event that progress is not made in these hostage talks, we know that the IDF is already preparing in the event that they do need to return to fighting. How do we expect Trump to respond on the Gaza issue should we not be able to reach a deal to get these hostages out as soon as possible?
Well, as you know, Trump and Steve Witkoff, on behalf of Trump, exerted a fair amount of direct pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to get to the ceasefire the first time. But that doesn't mean ceasefire at any cost. I think the goal for Trump is to get hostages released, and the onus now is on Hamas leadership. I think that Trump will be supportive, would be my guess, of renewed pressure focused on Hamas leadership with the specific goal, not of sort of reoccupying the Gaza Strip or anything like that, but altering the decision calculus. The idea that Hamas is still playing with the remaining hostage lives and the bodies of those who unfortunately are deceased as some sort of endgame, I think would anger Trump, and I think he's probably willing to support renewed strikes on leadership targets, which is what I understand is in the cards.
All right, well, hopefully it will not come to that, and we will be able to get those hostages home as soon as possible and reach some kind of a deal. We are unfortunately out of time, but I want to thank you, Colonel Rich Outzen, for joining us today on the broadcast.
Thank you.